When her son raised his glass at the wedding, she waited for gratitude. Instead, his words cut through her heart like glass. My father-in-law paid for everything. My mom, not even a flower. The morning of her son's wedding should have been filled with joy. Instead, Elena stood in front of her mirror, smoothing the wrinkles of her dress that wasn't new but borrowed from her sister. The fabric was tight around the seams, and the color, though elegant, whispered of a life that had been patched together year after year. She had imagined this day countless times when he was a boy. Her son, Daniel, walking down the aisle, her sitting proudly in the front row, tears of joy streaming down her face. But as she clipped the last pin into her hair, she felt the familiar tremor of nerves creep up her chest. She hoped no one would notice the age of her dress, or the scuffed heels she had polished with cooking oil that morning just to give them shine. 4 years she had saved scraps, counting every coin, planning for his future. Now that the day was here, she realized there was nothing left to give, not financially at least. Still, her heart swelled with pride. Love has to be enough, she whispered to her reflection. Across town, Daniel was a different picture altogether. His tuxedo was tailored perfectly, a gift from his soon-to-be father-in-law Robert, who had insisted no expense be spared. The hotel suite smelled of cologne and champagne. His groomsmen joked and laughed, slapping him on the back. Daniel grinned, nerves masked by excitement. He thought about how lucky he was, not just to be marrying Claire, but to be joining her family. Robert was everything he had never known in a father figure. Successful, generous, confident. In Daniel's mind, today was proof that he had finally stepped into a life larger than what he had grown up with. Elena will cry when she sees you, one of the groomsmen teased. My mom cries at everything, Daniel laughed, brushing off the comment. She'll be fine. Back in her small kitchen before leaving, Elena had prepared a small gift for her son. It wasn't wrapped in glossy paper or tied with ribbons. Instead, it was a handwritten letter folded carefully into an envelope. Inside, she had written about the night he was born, about the sacrifices she had made gladly, and about her love for him that no wealth could match. She tucked it into her purse, unsure if she'd ever have the courage to give it to him. At the church, the contrast was striking. Guests marveled at the floral arrangements, the crystal chandeliers, the choir that filled the air with melody, all gifts from Robert. Elena found her seat quietly, clutching her small purse, unnoticed among the glittering crowd. When the doors opened and Daniel entered, her heart swelled. He was radiant, confident, stepping into his new life. Tears blurred her vision, but she kept her smile steady. For a moment, she believed the years of struggle were worth it just to see him happy. As the ceremony unfolded, Elena's mind drifted back. She remembered nights working double shifts, returning home to find Daniel asleep on the couch with a schoolbook clutched to his chest. She remembered saying no to new shoes for herself so he could have cleats for soccer. She remembered patching his school uniform so many times the fabric had become more thread than cloth. Now, as she sat among guests dressed in finery, her chest ached with quiet pride. No one here knew those stories. No one here saw her sacrifices written into the lines of her face or the calluses on her hands. She didn't care, she told herself. It's enough that he knows. Has to be enough. But somewhere deep down, a whisper tugged at her. What if he doesn't? The ceremony ended in applause. The couple sealed with a kiss. Daniel looked radiant, Claire glowing beside him. Elena's hands trembled as she clapped. Her heart caught between joy and an ache she couldn't quite name. The guests moved to the reception hall, where champagne flowed and the band played. Elena followed quietly, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She found her seat in the corner, unnoticed again, yet content just to watch. Across the room, Daniel was the center of attention, laughing, shaking hands, embracing relatives from Claire's side. Elena's eyes shone with pride, even if her smile carried the weight of loneliness. In that room, 2 lives converged. A mother who had built a life out of scraps, and a son who now lived in abundance. Neither fully understood the other's world. Yet tonight, Their paths would collide in a way neither expected. The microphone crackled as Daniel stood, raising his glass for a toast. Elena's heart fluttered. She leaned forward, her eyes shining. Maybe, just maybe, he would mention her. Maybe tonight, in front of everyone, he would honor the love that had carried him here. And with that fragile hope, the act closes. On a mother's trembling anticipation and a son's careless confidence, seconds before the words that would change everything. The reception hall shimmered with light, the chandeliers scattering gold across the tables. The clinking of glasses echoed over the hum of conversation, and laughter spilled from every corner. Elena sat quietly at her table, fingers brushing the rim of her untouched champagne flute. Her eyes never left her son. Daniel stood at the center of the room, the microphone in his hand, his tuxedo catching the glow. Guests turned their heads toward him, smiles bright, anticipation hanging in the air. "First," he began, his voice strong, "I want to thank everyone for being here today. It means the world to Claire and me that you've joined us to celebrate." Elena's heart swelled. She leaned forward, her smile trembling. She thought of the letter tucked away in her purse, the words she hadn't dared to share yet. Maybe she wouldn't need to. Maybe he would say them himself. "I want to give special thanks to my new family," Daniel continued, turning toward Robert and Claire's mother. "Robert, you've been incredible. You paid for this entire wedding, made every detail possible. You gave us the celebration of our dreams." The room erupted in applause. Robert raised his glass, smiling modestly. Daniel's grin widened, his voice lifting with pride. "And my mom." Elena's breath caught. Her chest tightened as all eyes shifted toward her. Finally, she thought. Finally, he'll see me. Daniel chuckled, shaking his head lightly. "Well, my mom didn't contribute. Not even a flower." The words landed like a stone in water, sending ripples of shock across the hall. For a heartbeat, there was silence, an awkward, heavy pause, before the crowd responded with polite, uncomfortable laughter. Elena's smile froze. The air rushed from her lungs as if someone had struck her. She lowered her eyes to the table, hiding the tremble in her lips. Her hands gripped her champagne flute so tightly the glass nearly cracked. Inside, memories screamed. Nights of overtime shifts, empty stomachs, her son's laughter echoing in their small apartment. She had given everything. Everything. And here, in front of strangers, he said she gave nothing. Around her, whispers rose like gnats. A woman at the next table leaned toward her husband, murmuring something Elena couldn't catch. But she could feel it, the weight of pity pressing against her skin. Daniel moved on, oblivious to the wound he'd carved. "But she gave me life, and that's the greatest gift. So thank you, Mom." His words sounded light, joking. He didn't see how each syllable cut deeper than silence ever could. Elena forced herself to raise her glass, her smile plastered on like a mask. Her throat burned as she swallowed a sip of champagne, praying no one would notice her shaking hands. Claire's eyes darted to her mother-in-law, unease flickering across her face. She reached out to squeeze Daniel's arm, but he brushed her off, lost in the rhythm of his speech. The band struck up again, glasses clinked, and laughter returned. To everyone else, the moment had passed. But to Elena, time had stopped. The echo of his words carved themselves into her chest, each repetition heavier than the last. "Not even a flower." She excused herself from the table, murmuring something about needing air. Outside, the night was cooler, the stars scattered against the sky. She pressed her hand to her stomach, trying to breathe. The laughter from the hall drifted out behind her, muffled but relentless. A memory surged, the day Daniel graduated high school. He had hugged her, eyes shining, saying, "We did it, Mom. We did it together." That moment had felt like a victory for them both. Tonight felt like erasure. Inside, Daniel was swept into photographs and congratulations, unaware that his mother was standing alone outside, swallowing tears. At one point, a cousin approached Elena, concern etched on her face. "Are you all right?" Elena smiled weakly, nodding. Of course. It's his day. But when the cousin left, her smile crumbled. She leaned against the stone wall, her nails biting into her palm. The thought that her sacrifices had been invisible, that perhaps her son had never truly seen them, gnawed at her soul. Meanwhile, inside the hall, Daniel was radiant. He felt proud, relieved the speech had gone well. He didn't notice the way Claire's expression tightened whenever she glanced toward the empty seat at his mother's table. For Elena, the night became a blur. She returned to her seat eventually, wearing her mask of composure, but every laugh and every toast felt distant, as though she were watching from behind glass. She touched the letter in her purse, her fingers trembling. She wanted to give it to him, to remind him of all they had survived together. But the courage dissolved in the face of humiliation. She left it unopened, the paper pressing like a weight against her heart. As the evening wore on, Elena clapped when the couple danced, smiled in photographs, and thanked people politely. But her eyes never quite met Daniel's. And though he laughed and embraced his new family, somewhere beneath all the noise, a shadow had formed between them, one that neither yet understood, but that would change everything in the days to come. If you were Elena, would you have stayed silent during the toast or spoken up? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you would do. Hey there, my dear family and friends. If you're already tuned in and ready to enjoy this story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because tomorrow I'll be bringing you another story just as captivating, and you definitely don't want to miss it. The reception lingered into the night, but for Elena, time dragged like a weight tied to her ankles. She smiled when people looked her way, laughed softly when addressed, but inside she was hollow. At her table, she picked at the dinner, though she had no appetite. She could hear Daniel's laughter across the room, full and unbothered. Every chuckle was a reminder. He doesn't know. He doesn't see me. When Claire stopped by to greet her, Elena straightened in her seat. You look beautiful tonight, Claire said kindly, her eyes soft. Thank you, dear, Elena replied, forcing a smile. She wanted to believe Claire's warmth was genuine, but the sting of Daniel's words still echoed. Claire hesitated, then added, Daniel didn't mean anything by it. You know how he jokes. The words fell like a stone in Elena's chest. She nodded, because what else could she do? Of course. He was just being playful. But inside her heart screamed. It wasn't playful. It was truth disguised as humor. Across the room, Daniel basked in the glow of his new in-laws. Robert kept a proud arm around his shoulder. Guests praised his speech, and Daniel accepted it all with easy charm. When someone asked, "Did your mom really not help at all?" Daniel shrugged, chuckling. "She didn't. Robert took care of everything. Mom's fine with it. She's never been big on events." The words traveled fast, whispers floating through the crowd. Cousins whispered to aunts, friends leaned toward each other. By the time they reached Elena's ears, they stung even sharper. She's fine with it. She never helps anyway. Her hand tightened around her purse. The letter inside felt heavier than stone. When the night ended, Elena slipped out quietly, unnoticed. She told herself she hadn't wanted to draw attention, that it was better not to ruin his day. But in truth, she left because staying hurt too much. The next morning, Daniel sat in the honeymoon suite, sipping coffee, his new wife beside him. Claire watched him silently, worry flickering in her eyes. "You should call your mom," she suggested gently. Daniel looked up, surprised. "Why? He's fine." She was smiling all night. Claire hesitated. "She left early." "She's probably tired," Daniel said, waving it off. "Besides, Robert wants to meet us for brunch. I can call Mom later." Claire studied him for a long moment, wanting to press further, but she swallowed her words. She knew this wasn't the time. Back in her small apartment, Elena sat at the kitchen table, staring at the half-empty teacup in front of her. The letter to Daniel lay on the table now, unfolded. Her handwriting stared back at her, full of love, full of memory. She had written lines like, "I missed meals so you wouldn't. I turned down dates so I could be home with you. I worked double shifts so you'd have a uniform for school." Now the words blurred through her tears. She folded the letter again, sliding it back into the envelope. She told herself she would never give it to him. He didn't want reminders of her sacrifices. He had his new family now. When relatives called to check in, Elena played her part. "Oh yes, the wedding was beautiful," she said brightly. "Yes, Claire's family is wonderful. I'm so happy for Daniel." But when she hung up, her voice cracked into silence. Meanwhile, Daniel brushed off everything. When friends teased him, "That line about your mom was brutal," he laughed. "She knows I'm joking." To him it was harmless. To Elena it was everything. 2 days later, Claire found him scrolling through his phone, oblivious. She sat beside him, her voice quiet. "Daniel, do you think your mom might have been hurt by what you said?" He frowned. "Hurt? Well, she's tougher than that. She knows I appreciate her." "I thanked her, didn't I?" "You thanked her after saying she gave nothing," Claire whispered. Daniel's smile faltered for the first time. "I didn't mean it like that." Claire touched his arm. "Meaning doesn't erase impact." The words lingered long after she left the room. That night, Elena lay awake, the city lights spilling through her thin curtains. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Thanks again for coming, Mom. Love you." Her heart twisted. 3 small words, typed without thought. Did he really love her? Or was it obligation, a habit of politeness? She typed back, "Love you too, son." But her fingers hovered, aching to add, "You hurt me." She deleted the thought, sending only the 3 simple words. Silence stretched between them. Elena convinced herself to resist speaking out. She didn't want to be that mother, the one who made a wedding about herself. She told herself Daniel was happy, and that had to be enough. But the wound festered. Every time she replayed his voice in her mind, "Not even a flower," the ache deepened. And though Daniel believed the storm had passed, a quiet chasm had begun to open between them, one that would only grow wider if left unspoken. Do you believe Daniel was truly joking, or was there hidden truth behind his words? Comment below. Your answer might reveal how you see the bond between parents and children. 3 days after the wedding, the newlyweds hosted a brunch for close family. It was Claire's idea, a chance to unwind, exchange stories, and celebrate without the chaos of the big day. Robert insisted on holding it at his estate, a sprawling house with glass windows and manicured gardens that made Elena feel smaller the moment she stepped inside. She almost hadn't come. All morning she had stared at her reflection, her stomach heavy with dread. But when Claire called personally, her voice warm and earnest, "Please come, it wouldn't be the same without you," Elena forced herself to go. She told herself it was for her son. Always for her son. Inside, laughter spilled down the halls, the scent of freshly baked pastries filling the air. Elena clutched her purse tightly, her heels clicking on marble as she entered the dining room. At the long oak table, family was already gathered. Daniel sat at the head, glowing, Claire beside him. His smile lit up when he saw his mother. "Mom, you came." Elena's heart squeezed. She nodded, offering a small smile. "Of course." She sat across from him, directly in his line of sight. For the first time since the wedding, there was no crowd to shield them, no music to drown out silence. Just family, just eyes, just tension humming between mother and son. The brunch began with cheerful chatter. Robert spoke about the honeymoon destinations he recommended. Claire's mother gushed over the ceremony. Cousins shared stories from the dance floor. Elena ate in silence, her fork moving mechanically. Halfway through the meal, Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, you didn't say much at the wedding. Did you enjoy it?" The question was simple, but Elena's chest tightened. Everyone's eyes shifted to her, waiting. She forced a smile. "It was beautiful." Claire looked radiant. "You were happy." Daniel frowned slightly, sensing something beneath her tone. "You sure?" You left early. Elena's fork clattered softly against her plate. She folded her hands in her lap. I was tired. Silence stretched. The kind that presses, that demands to be broken. Claire glanced between them, her brows knitting, but she stayed quiet. Robert cleared his throat, shifting the conversation back to honeymoon plans. Laughter returned, but Daniel's gaze lingered on his mother. Later, when the brunch ended and guests drifted toward the garden, Elena slipped out to the patio for air. She leaned against the railing, breathing in the scent of roses. The sun was bright, but her chest felt heavy. The sliding door opened behind her. Daniel stepped out. For the first time since the wedding, they were alone. Mom. His voice was softer now, uncertain. Elena didn't turn. Yes. He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. Did I say something wrong at the wedding? Claire thinks. Well, she said maybe I hurt you. Her hands gripped the railing. She searched for words, but her throat burned. She wanted to scream yes. She wanted to say you humiliated me. But all that came out was, it was your day. That's all that matters. Daniel frowned. That's not an answer. She turned then, her eyes meeting his. They were glossy, holding back what she had buried for days. But she swallowed it, forcing composure. I'm fine. The silence between them was louder than words. Daniel shifted, uncomfortable, sensing a wall he didn't know how to climb. He thought of his toast, replaying it in his mind. It had been a joke, hadn't it? But now, looking at her, he wondered. Mom, he tried again, his voice tentative. You know I didn't mean anything by it. I was just joking. Her lips trembled, but she smiled anyway. Of course. But her eyes betrayed her. The glisten of unshed tears, the way her smile faltered when she thought he wasn't looking. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. If I hurt you, I'm sorry. Her chest clenched. The apology was light, casual, lacking the weight of understanding. She nodded once, not trusting her voice. From inside, Claire called his name. Daniel glanced back toward the dining room, torn, then gave his mother a half-smile before leaving her on the patio. Elena exhaled, her hands trembling. The forced proximity had pulled them close, but instead of resolution, it had only deepened the silence. Words unsaid pressed heavier than ever. That night, back in her apartment, Elena sat by the window, staring at the city lights. She replayed his face, his careless smile, his shallow apology. Did he really not understand? Did he truly not see her? The letter lay on her nightstand, untouched. She thought of burning it. Maybe it was better that way. Maybe he didn't need to know. Maybe he didn't want to know. But deep down, a whisper clawed at her heart. He will never understand unless he sees what you carried for him. If you were in Elena's place, would you open up to your son in that moment on the patio, or keep silent like she did? Drop your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your perspective. The week after the brunch, Daniel and Claire returned from a short getaway. Robert had arranged everything, the flights, the hotel, even the welcome champagne. Daniel basked in the glow of his new life, still replaying the laughter of the wedding. Yet Claire carried an unease she couldn't shake. One evening, she found Daniel scrolling through photos on his phone, smiling at a picture of himself with Robert. He really came through for us, huh? Daniel said, pride in his voice. Claire hesitated. Yes, but so did your mom in her way. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? She didn't help with the wedding. Claire set her phone down, her tone soft but firm. Maybe not with money. But Daniel, I think she's carried more than you realize. The words unsettled him. He brushed them off, but later that night when Claire fell asleep, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He thought of his mom's eyes on the patio, glossy but silent. The way her smile cracked when she thought he wasn't watching. Something gnawed at him. The next day, Daniel stopped by Elena's apartment. He hadn't told her he was coming. She opened the door, surprised, her hair tied back, apron dusted with flour. Daniel, she said, blinking. I wasn't expecting you. I was in the neighborhood, he lied. She stepped aside to let him in. The apartment smelled faintly of bread. Warm, familiar. Daniel sat at the small kitchen table, the same one he'd eaten at as a child. His gaze fell on the worn wood, covered in scratches from years of homework and coloring books. "How are you, Mom?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "I'm fine." Silence pressed between them. Daniel's eyes wandered, landing on a photo frame propped on the counter. It was him, age 12, holding a soccer trophy. His mother stood beside him, her arm around his shoulders, her smile tired but proud. "Remember that day?" Elena asked softly, noticing his stare. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, I forgot about that." Her eyes shimmered. "You wanted new cleats for the game. We couldn't afford them. I patched your old ones with glue and string." Daniel's brow furrowed. He had never thought about that. Never asked how she made things last. Later, when Elena stepped into the kitchen to check the oven, Daniel's eyes fell on a stack of unopened envelopes on the side table. "Bills. Past due." Quietly, he picked one up. "Electricity." Another medical. His chest tightened. He set them down quickly before she returned, guilt curling in his stomach. "Smells good," he said, forcing cheer. She placed a loaf of bread on the table, slicing it carefully. "Your favorite. Fresh from the oven." As they ate, she told him stories he barely remembered. Walking home in the snow when the car broke down, skipping meals so he could eat, working late into the night while he slept. She didn't say it with bitterness, but with tenderness, as if even the hard moments had been worth it. Daniel listened, guilt gnawing at him. He remembered being angry as a teenager, resenting their small apartment, wishing for a father who could provide more. He never once asked what his mother gave up for him. That night back home, Daniel couldn't shake the images. The patched cleats, the unpaid bills, the tired smile in old photographs. He replayed his own words at the wedding. "Not even a flower." The shame pressed heavier now. A few days later, Daniel overheard something that pierced deeper. He had stopped by his aunt's house to pick up a family heirloom Claire wanted. In the kitchen, his aunt was speaking quietly with another relative. "I don't know how Elena managed all those years," his aunt said. "She gave up everything for that boy. And then at the wedding. Did you hear what he said? My heart broke for her." Daniel froze in the hallway, his chest burning. The relative sighed. "He probably didn't mean it. But imagine sacrificing your whole life, only to be dismissed in front of everyone." Their voices faded as they moved to another room, but the weight of their words remained. Daniel's throat tightened. He saw it clearly now. How his joke wasn't a joke at all. It had been a knife. That evening, he returned to Elena's apartment again. She greeted him warmly, surprised at the frequency of his visits. "I was just about to have tea," she said. "Join me." He nodded, sitting at the table again. His eyes scanned the small room, the chipped mugs, the thin curtains, the faint hum of an old fridge. This had been his world growing up, and she had built it with her own 2 hands. "Mom," he said finally, his voice low, "why didn't you ever tell me how hard it was for you?" She looked at him, her eyes gentle. "Because you were a child. It wasn't your burden to carry." "But I should have known," he whispered. She smiled faintly. "No. All you needed to know was that you were loved. That was enough for me." Daniel's chest ached. He wanted to confess everything, to admit how blind he had been, how cruel his words had sounded. But the lump in his throat silenced him. Instead, he reached for her hand. For a brief moment, she let him hold it. Her palm was rough, calloused from years of labor, but warm. And though neither of them said the words out loud, something shifted in Daniel's heart that night. The veil of ignorance had lifted. For the first time, he truly began to see her. Do you think parents should tell their children about their sacrifices, or protect them from those burdens like Elena did? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your perspective. The following weekend, Daniel called his mother and asked if she wanted to spend the afternoon together. Elena hesitated at first. Part of her feared more shallow words, another part feared her own emotions might spill out, but his voice carried a gentleness she hadn't heard in years. So she agreed. They met at a small park near her apartment, one they had visited countless times when Daniel was a boy. The benches were weathered, the playground squeaked with children's laughter, and the smell of roasted peanuts drifted from a vendor nearby. Daniel arrived carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. "I remembered you like it with extra cream," he said, handing one to her. Elena's lips curved faintly. "You remembered." They sat together, watching children chase each other across the grass. For a while neither spoke. The silence was different this time. Not sharp, not suffocating, but tentative, like a wound slowly healing. Finally Daniel chuckled softly. "Remember when I used to climb that jungle gym and pretend I was on top of a castle?" Elena smiled, her eyes distant with memory. "And you refused to come down until I called you Your Majesty." He laughed, shaking his head. "I was a handful. You were my joy," she corrected gently. The words hung between them, warm and tender. Daniel's chest tightened. He had taken her love for granted so long, yet it had never wavered. They sipped their coffee in silence. A breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass. Daniel's gaze drifted to her hands resting on the cup. They were weathered, veins visible, nails trimmed short. He thought of all the years those hands had worked. For him, always for him. "Mom," he said quietly, "I've been thinking about everything you did for me. The jobs, the nights you stayed up with me, the times you went without. I didn't see it before. But I see it now." Her eyes shimmered, but she held his gaze. "Daniel, I was wrong at the wedding," he said, his voice breaking. "I hurt you. I made it sound like you gave me nothing when you gave me everything. I'm so sorry." The tears she had held back for days finally welled. She turned slightly, wiping them with the back of her hand. "You don't need to apologize. You're happy, that's all I ever wanted." "But I do need to apologize," he insisted, "because I made you feel invisible. And you've never been invisible to me." "Not really. I was just too blind to say it." Her heart trembled. She wanted to believe him, to let the words sink in, but years of silence made it hard. Yet as she looked at him now, sincerity etched into his face, she felt a fragile hope stirring. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket. "I found this at your place." He pulled out a photo he had quietly taken from her shelf. Him at 6 years old, grinning with 2 missing teeth, Elena crouched beside him, hair messy from work but smiling wide. "I love this picture," he said softly. "You look so tired but so proud." "I never realized what that meant until now." Elena's lips trembled. "I was proud. Every single day." He slipped the photo back into his pocket. "I want you to know, Mom. Money doesn't erase what you did. Nothing Robert gave me could ever compare to what you gave me." Her tears spilled freely now. She reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "All I ever wanted was for you to be happy. To know you were loved." "I know that now," he whispered. They sat like that for a long time, hand in hand, the sun dipping lower in the sky. Later, Daniel suggested they grab dinner together. They went to a small diner Elena used to take him to after soccer games when she couldn't afford fancy restaurants. The place hadn't changed much. The same red booths, the same chalkboard menu. As they waited for their food, Daniel smiled. "Remember when I used to beg for extra fries? And you'd pretend you weren't hungry just so I could have them?" Elena laughed softly. "I was hungry. But seeing you happy filled me more than food ever could." Daniel's throat tightened. "I never knew. I just thought you didn't like fries." Her laughter grew, shaking her shoulders. "Oh, Daniel." For the first time in days they laughed together. Real laughter, light and healing. People at nearby tables glanced their way, smiling at the sound. When their food arrived, Daniel pushed the fries toward her. "You're eating these tonight." She raised an eyebrow, amused. "Is this your way of repaying me?" It's a start. They shared the meal, the conversation flowing easily now. Memories, jokes, even small silences that felt comfortable. It was as though, for a brief moment, they had returned to the bond they once had, before pride and misunderstanding had wedged itself between them. When Daniel dropped her off at her apartment that evening, he lingered at the door. "Mom, can I come by again this week?" Her smile was tender, fragile. "You never have to ask." As he hugged her goodnight, Elena buried her face into his shoulder, letting the warmth wash over her. For the first time since the wedding, she felt seen, truly seen. And though she knew healing was still fragile, she allowed herself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. For a few weeks, Daniel visited his mother often. They shared coffee, dinners, quiet walks in the park. Slowly, the heaviness between them lifted. Elena's heart dared to believe their bond was mending. But peace is fragile, and one careless word can undo everything. It was a Sunday afternoon. Claire had organized a small family barbecue at Robert's house. Elena had been invited, though she almost declined. But Daniel insisted. "Please come, Mom. I want you there." So she came, bringing her famous potato salad, the one Daniel had loved since childhood. She carried the glass bowl nervously through the grand doorway, feeling out of place among the lavish trays of catered food. Robert greeted her politely, though his smile was thin. "Elena," he said, taking the salad. "Thank you." He handed it off to the house staff, setting it on the far corner of the buffet table, barely noticeable among the gleaming silver platters. Elena's chest tightened, but she said nothing. As the afternoon went on, guests filled the garden with laughter. Children played on the lawn, and music floated from hidden speakers. Elena lingered near the edge, watching Daniel laugh with Robert. They clinked beer bottles, Robert slapping his back proudly as if he were his own son. Claire joined Elena, trying to make her feel included. "Your potato salad looks amazing," she said warmly. Elena smiled faintly. "It's Daniel's favorite." Claire nodded. "He talks about it all the time." The words soothed Elena's heart, but only for a moment. Because just then, she heard Robert speaking loudly to a group of relatives. "You know, it was my honor to give Daniel and Claire the wedding they deserved. Every detail, every cent, worth it for their happiness. That boy is like a son to me." Laughter and applause followed. Daniel raised his glass. "To Robert." The group cheered. Elena froze, her breath catching in her throat. She waited for Daniel to add something to acknowledge her presence, her years of sacrifice. But he didn't. Not a word. The evening wore on. After dinner, Daniel wandered over to Elena, grinning. "Mom, did you eat? Wasn't the food amazing?" Her lips pressed into a line. "Yes, very impressive." He didn't notice her tone. "Robert really knows how to throw a party, huh? We're lucky to have him." Something inside her cracked. She looked at her son, her voice trembling. "Lucky? Is that what you call it?" Daniel blinked. "What do you mean?" Her eyes burned. "Do you even hear yourself? All you talk about is Robert, what he's done, what he's given. Do you ever stop to think about what I gave you?" His smile faltered. "Mom, please, not here." "No, Daniel," she interrupted, her voice sharper now. "Not here, not anywhere. You've never said it. Not once. You stood in front of everyone at your wedding and thanked him for giving you everything. And what did you say about me? Not even a flower." Her voice cracked on the words. Heads turned. Guests nearby fell silent. Daniel's face reddened. "Mom, I already told you I didn't mean it like that." Her chest heaved. "But you did mean it. Maybe not with words, but with how you live. With how easily you let me disappear in his shadow." The silence was suffocating. Claire stood frozen a few feet away, torn between them. Robert sipped his drink, eyes cold, as if enjoying the spectacle. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Why are you doing this? Why can't you just let it go? This was supposed to be a happy day." Her heart broke at the words. "Let it go? Do you have any idea what I let go of, Daniel? Do you know how many nights I cried because I couldn't give you more? How many meals I skipped so you could eat? How many times I worked until my hands bled just to keep a roof over your head? Her voice shook, tears spilling freely now. And yet you stand there and tell me to let it go, as if my love, my sacrifices meant nothing. The garden was silent. Even the music seemed to fade. Daniel's face was pale, his eyes darting around at the watching guests. Embarrassment flared in him, mixing with defensiveness. "This isn't the time or place, Mom," he hissed. Her shoulders sagged. She saw it then, the shame on his face, not for what he'd done, but for her daring to speak it aloud. Elena's heart shattered. She placed her empty glass on the table and whispered, "You're right, Daniel. This isn't the place. Maybe there never will be." Then she turned and walked out of the garden, her steps trembling but resolute. That night, Elena sat alone in her apartment, the potato salad bowl still in her hands, untouched. The silence of the room was crushing. For years, she had believed her love was enough. But tonight she questioned it all. Had she failed him somehow? Was she too proud, too silent about her struggles? Or had her son simply chosen not to see her? Her tears soaked into the couch cushion as she whispered into the empty room, "Was I ever enough?" Meanwhile, Daniel sat in Robert's garden long after the guests left. Claire tried to comfort him, but he barely heard her. His mother's words echoed relentlessly. "How many meals I skipped, how many nights I cried." He buried his face in his hands, shame suffocating him. But still, pride clung tightly, whispering excuses. "She embarrassed me in front of everyone. She should have waited." Yet deep down, beneath the pride, a voice whispered something he could no longer ignore. "You broke her heart." In a moment like this, who do you think is more in the wrong? Elena for airing her pain publicly, or Daniel for silencing her again? Share your thoughts in the comments. The week after the barbecue was suffocating. For the first time since the wedding, Daniel didn't call his mother. Elena didn't reach out either. The silence between them felt like an ocean, wide, cold, impossible to cross. In her apartment, Elena went about her days in a haze. She cooked simple meals but barely ate. The bowl from the barbecue still sat on her counter, untouched, as if mocking her. At night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her son's words haunted her. "This isn't the time or place." She replayed her outburst, shame mingling with heartbreak. Had she been wrong to speak? Maybe she had embarrassed him. Maybe she had made herself the villain. But then she remembered his face at the wedding, his voice dismissing her, and the years she had swallowed her pain. She whispered into the darkness, "What else was I supposed to do?" Her heart ached with a mother's longing, wanting to protect him, wanting to be seen, wanting both things at once. Across town, Daniel sat in his apartment with Claire. He hadn't touched dinner. The weight of his mother's words pressed heavy on him, but so did his pride. "She shouldn't have said that in front of everyone," he muttered. Claire looked at him gently. "Maybe. But, Daniel, don't you see why she did?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I don't know. She's always been strong. I never realized how much she hid." "She wasn't trying to shame you," Claire said softly. "She was begging to be seen." Her words cut deep. Daniel buried his face in his hands. "I don't know how to fix this." "You start by choosing," Claire said. "Pride or love. You can't have both." The next day, Daniel found himself walking aimlessly after work. Somehow, his feet led him to the park near his childhood home, the same one where he and his mother had shared coffee weeks earlier. He sat on a bench, watching the children play. He remembered being their age, calling himself Your Majesty on the jungle gym, laughing as his mother bowed dramatically just to make him smile. Tears pricked his eyes. He had made her bow all her life, hadn't he? And he had never once bowed back. His chest heaved as shame crashed over him. For the first time he said the words out loud. "I broke her heart." A father and son passed by. the boy clutching an ice cream cone, the father smiling down at him with warmth. Daniel's throat tightened. He thought of Robert, and how easily he had slipped into the role of provider and protector. But it was Elena, his mother, who had carried the real weight, invisible and unpraised. He realized then that love wasn't about money or parties or polished speeches. It was about sacrifice. And his mother's love had been the truest kind. That evening, Elena sat by her window, the city lights flickering in the distance. She held an old photo album in her lap, flipping through worn pages. There was Daniel as a baby, asleep on her chest. Daniel at his first day of school, her hand clutching his backpack strap. Daniel in patched soccer cleats, grinning after a game. Her tears spilled as she traced his face with her fingers. "You were always worth it," she whispered. A knock sounded at the door. She froze, heart pounding. Slowly, she set the album aside and stood. When she opened the door, Daniel stood there, eyes red-rimmed, shoulders heavy. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel said, his voice raw, "Mom, I don't want pride anymore. I just want you." Her breath hitched. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I've been so blind. You gave me more than anyone ever could, and I threw it back in your face. I thought money was worth more than love. I was wrong." His voice broke. "I was so wrong." Tears streamed down Elena's cheeks. She wanted to rush into his arms, but fear still lingered. "Daniel, words are easy." "I know," he said quickly. "And I'll spend the rest of my life proving I mean them. But please, Mom, don't shut me out now. Not when I finally see you." The silence stretched, thick with unshed tears, with the weight of years unspoken. Finally, Elena whispered, trembling, "Do you know how many nights I prayed you would see me?" Daniel stepped closer, his voice shaking. "I see you now. I promise, I'll never let you feel invisible again." And in that moment, Elena let herself believe. Her arms opened, and he fell into them, burying his face in her shoulder like he had as a child. They both wept, not just for the wound of the wedding, but for all the years of silence, the unspoken love, the missed chances. Later, as they sat at her kitchen table, Daniel picked up the old photo album. He flipped through the pictures, stopping at one of Elena smiling proudly beside him in his patched cleats. "This," he said softly, tapping the photo, "means more than any wedding could. And I'm going to make sure the world knows it." Elena's lips trembled. For the first time in weeks, she smiled without pain. 2 months after the barbecue, another family gathering took place. This time smaller, quieter. Claire's birthday. Unlike the wedding or Robert's lavish events, this celebration was held in Daniel and Claire's modest apartment, decorated with streamers and the warm smell of home-cooked food. Elena almost didn't come. Fear lingered, the memory of humiliation still raw. But Daniel had called her personally. His voice tender and steady. "Please, Mom, I need you here. Not just as a guest. As my mother." And so she came. When she entered the apartment, the first thing she saw was her son bustling in the kitchen, apron tied around his waist. He looked up and grinned. "Mom, you're early." She laughed softly. "Old habits." Daniel hurried over, kissing her cheek, then ushered her to the table. "I saved you a seat right here beside me." She sat down, her heart tugged by the small but deliberate gesture. The room filled gradually with friends and family, chatter bouncing off the walls. Robert was there too, standing stiff near the window, but tonight the air felt different. Dinner passed with laughter and light conversation. Elena even caught herself smiling, enjoying the simple warmth of togetherness. For a while it felt like any other family night. But when dessert was served, Daniel suddenly stood. He held his glass in one hand, his face solemn. The room quieted, all eyes on him. Elena's breath caught, memories of the wedding toast crashing back. He cleared his throat. "I'd like to say something." Claire reached for his hand, nodding with quiet encouragement. Daniel looked around the room, then fixed his gaze on Elena. At my wedding I made a mistake. Big one. I stood in front of everyone and thanked Robert for paying for everything. And then I said something thoughtless, something cruel. I said my mom hadn't even given a flower. Murmurs rippled through the guests. Elena's face flushed, but Daniel raised his hand gently. I want to set the record straight tonight, he continued, his voice trembling with emotion. My mom may not have given money or flowers for the wedding, but she gave me something far greater, everything she had every single day of my life. She gave me her strength, her sacrifice, her love. When I had patched shoes, she made them last. When I was hungry, she went without. When I doubted myself, she cheered the loudest. She gave me more than anyone else ever could. His voice cracked, tears brimming in his eyes. So tonight I want to honor her properly. Not with jokes, not with dismissive words, but with truth. Mom, you are the reason I am who I am. And I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. The room was silent, thick with emotion. Claire's eyes glistened. Several guests dabbed their faces with napkins. Elena's chest heaved, her hand trembling as she brought it to her lips. For so long she had dreamed of hearing words like these, but never dared believe they would come. Daniel stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. Mom, you are my flower, the most beautiful one. And I should have said it long ago. The dam inside her broke. Tears spilled freely as she stood, pulling him into her arms. They clung to each other, both sobbing, both whispering apologies and I love yous into each other's shoulders. The guests erupted into soft applause, the moment so raw, so real, no one could look away. Even Robert, standing stiff by the window, lowered his gaze. For once, he had nothing to add. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the apartment was quiet, Elena lingered on the couch while Daniel cleared the dishes. He sat beside her, taking her hand in his. Mom, I know words aren't enough, but I want to do more. I want the world to know your story, to know how much you gave. She shook her head gently. The world doesn't need to know. You knowing that's enough. But Daniel's eyes were steady. No, I want to live my life in a way that honors you. I want my kids, when I have them, to know the kind of love you showed me. Elena's tears glistened, but this time they were not from pain. They were from hope. Then that is all the legacy I need. Weeks turned into months. Daniel visited his mother often, sometimes with Claire, sometimes alone. He fixed things around her apartment, cooked her dinner, and laughed with her over old stories. The invisible wall between them had crumbled. In its place grew something stronger, deeper. Love recognized, love spoken aloud. And every time he hugged her, every time he whispered thank you, Mom, Elena felt her heart knit together, healed by the son who finally saw her. The story came full circle one spring afternoon. Daniel brought Elena a bouquet of fresh flowers. Lilies, her favorite. For you, he said, smiling. She gasped softly, taking them in her hands. Daniel, they're beautiful. He leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. You deserve 1,000 bouquets. But this is just the beginning. Elena's eyes shimmered. For the first time in years, she felt whole.
Thank you so much for watching this video to the very end, and I'm confident you enjoyed it. We've got plenty more exciting and heartwarming stories waiting for you. Just click on the image on your screen to watch the next one. And do not forget to subscribe for more.